Hi friends, my name is Al or Lilstarnerd, and welcome to today's episode of Redemption. I am so excited to show you this video today. I can't wait to talk about it, so we're just gonna get right into it. No stalling. I want to talk about it. So a while back, I got a commission. It was a pretty strange commission. I had no deadline, I had no guidance, and the only prompt I had was night. That was it. That was literally all I had to go off of. Also, it had to be an 18 by 24 canvas, but that was it. I was really worried and nervous at first because the person also requested that the piece be a complete and total surprise, meaning they didn't even want to approve my concept before I started. So I was going in completely and totally blind. I made a whole Pinterest board dedicated to medieval dress and armor and weapons, and I played around with a few concepts. I ended up coming up with a reference photo that I absolutely fell in love with myself, but I was worried that my client wouldn't really like it. I convinced them to let me show them the photo, and they agreed that it wasn't really what they had in mind, which worked out perfectly actually, because now I can keep that photo for myself to paint later. And they gave me a bit more direction. They wanted something darker, moodier, a bit more gothic, and they wanted like leathery elements to the armor, not just metal. So I went back to the drawing board, back to the Pinterest board, and I came up with a few more concepts, but none of them were making me as excited as that first photo, so I took a break for a bit. After a few good weeks, I came back to the board with totally fresh eyes, and I ended up with this. I had pieced together quite a few photos, altered a lot of elements, added in some chopped up photos of myself, scribbled on top of stuff. I wanted to make sure that this wasn't just a copied photo, but was actually like mostly my own original work. Of course, I still had to base the armor on a photo because my understanding of metal and leather and the way light works with it, or even just how it's designed and used, is just not advanced enough for me to fully create something from my mind yet, but I'm working on it. After I created the reference photo, I took some time to just look at it, familiarize myself with it, figure it out, create a mental plan, and I thought, I want to do this in oils. I think most artists will understand this, but a lot of times certain pieces just need to be done in a specific medium, you know what I mean? That's the only way it'll work, both physically and mentally. And this painting just needed to be done in oils. I couldn't imagine doing this in acrylic, not only because it would be so difficult, it would require so much time, would take up so much paint, would be impossible to blend, but also because I really felt that only oils would achieve the look that I imagined this painting having in my head. However, if you've seen my channel before, you probably know that I don't really have much experience with oil painting. I've done one official oil painting before, that was pretty recently. Not to mention before this, I had only done 2 paintings this size. So the idea of using oils was risky, I reached out to the client and I pitched them my idea and they gave their blessing. So now this was not just a cool commission, it was also a huge step for me as an artist. There was a lot of mental preparation for this and a lot of psychological buildup. Although I was nervous and unsure that I could pull this off in oils and also dreading the workload that was coming up, I did overall feel excited and generally confident about it. I was really excited to work with oils again, and I was really looking forward to finding out if working in oils on a larger scale as a regular medium would work well for me. It was also the first time I would be painting in my new art studio setup, so I was eager to see how that would work. And I was coming off a period of really taking it easy on art production, so I was really ready to get back to it. The first step, of course, was the grid and sketch. I always use the grid method when I'm doing something on a scale that is out of my comfort zone, specifically large scale pieces. When I sketch, I'm very focused on just the lines that I'm drawing in that exact moment, and the big picture is kind of in the back of my head. But when you're working at such a large scale, keeping the big picture in mind is really important all the time. It's really easy to mess up the proportions or the angles because you get too focused on one tiny area, you know? So instead of drawing an entire woman on the canvas and having to get every little line perfect on this giant piece, I only have to worry about 1 square inch at a time. I'm only replicating one little box, so it's really easy to make my sketch accurate and proportionate. I could theoretically go without the grid and end up in the same spot, but it would probably take me 3 or 4 tries, lots of erasing, which is difficult on canvas and can wear the canvas down, and it won't even turn out as good, so why not save all that time and just use the grid? If you're wondering how I did the grid, I always put my reference photo into Photoshop and adjust the canvas size in Photoshop to be the same units as whatever I'm working on, so in this case it was an 18 by 24. There's a feature in Photoshop that overlays a grid on your image, which I usually set to 1 by 1 inch depending on the size of the piece. You can make it whatever size you want. And then I draw that same grid on my canvas, and that's all there is to it. Okay, we are at what I would consider mentally the halfway point. Physically speaking, probably a third of the way through maybe. Her face is pretty much there. I need to add detail and like highlights and real shadow, but overall it's kind of there. Actually, it's not really. I mean, it is. Like the skin is there. The scars need work, the lips, okay, so it's not there. It's not there. Besides that, everything else is still on its first coat, and obviously some things don't even have a first coat. But despite the fact that it's not even kind of done, I'm loving the way it's looking. Like when I take a step back from far away, it looks good. Like I really think it, even though like this is nothing, like this is not done at all. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. I was very nervous going in with oils, but I do not regret it. I'm having so much fun with this. And honestly, I'm kind of liking the messy look. I like that it feels complete despite not at all being complete. So I don't think it'll take too much work when I go in with like the second and third layers. Speaking of layers, my approach going in is I feel like it's a bit of an acrylic mindset. If you've seen any of my other videos, you probably know I have very, very little experience with oil, and I have a lot more experience with acrylic. So I definitely went into this with a similar plan that I use for acrylics, but I think it's working fine. It's just the way my brain works. Like even putting like acrylic experience aside, like that's just what I like to do. Have like rough drafts of things before I go on with the original. It's like having like 8 sketch layers, you know? But yeah, it's going really good. I think I'll only need a few more days of painting. The background is mainly gonna be like dark splotches, dark like black and gray splotches, because I don't want it to distract too much from all the detail in the armor. So ideally that'll only take 1 layer, should be pretty easy and fast to do. And a lot of this painting is gonna be like really dark areas, so that should also be pretty easy and fast to do. Like all of the cape back in here and a lot of like the armor itself is just gonna be carving out with shadow. Another thing I'm really excited to see is like how I do the chainmail. I have an idea, I have no idea if it's gonna work, so I'm excited to see how it turns out. But yeah, I'm having a really good time. It's making me really want to do more original and bigger pieces in oil. I'm excited about this. But yeah, okay, that's the mid painting check-in. Back to the painting, I guess. Okay. Once the sketch was done, I had to pick out my color palette. This was especially nerve-wracking because the only other oil painting I've done used the Zorn palette, which is only 4 colors. I really didn't know how small or big I wanted the palette to be and how that would affect my process. I stared at my photo for a while and tried to determine the colors I knew I would want to reach for. Obviously, like colors make a skin tone. I knew I was going to be using black, lots of blues for the armor, definitely red to make a purple. Then I dug through my oils and deliberated a bit more. I pulled out the Zorn palette because I knew I liked those colors: ivory black, white, yellow ochre, and cad red. But I knew from my experience with that palette that I wanted some brighter yellows for the skin. I also pulled burnt sienna for some warmer earthy tones for the armor and hair, and I pulled a lighter and darker blue again for the armor. And then a last minute impulse was the Theo Violet. I originally intended to mix my own purples, but because it was such a prevalent color and I wasn't getting bonus points for like having a limited palette, I thought I may as well add it into the mix. I'm gonna interrupt the process explanation here to talk about the color palette for a really quick second. I ended up being really happy with the color choices. I am so glad I pulled out the violet as well as both blues, although I rarely actually use the lighter one, but it did come in handy. I think the only colors I found I didn't reach for that much were the 2 lighter yellows. In hindsight, I think just a tiny drop of that really light lemony yellow, the Hansa yellow, would have been fine. I did use it to warm up her face and add some lightness, especially in the rosiness of her cheeks and knuckles, but otherwise I didn't really reach for either of those yellows at all. I'm honestly not sure I used any cad yellow, now that I think about it. Although I do think that in other pieces I definitely would. Like this specific piece is pretty dark and there's not much skin showing, so I didn't have much use for the yellows, but I definitely see the value and purpose that they have on a palette, which was a great learning experience. Like in the future, I definitely think Hansa Yellow will be like a staple, I think, for me. This was my first time being really conscious and purposeful when picking my own palette while painting, and it was a great experience. I feel like I learned a lot. I was worried having so many more than 4 colors would be overwhelming, but I think it was actually really manageable. I think for my next painting, I'd really like to try totally new colors, more vibrant colors, step out of my comfort zone in that area. I've never had green on my palette for oils, so I think that could be fun. Anyways, back to the process. Once I had my colors picked out, there was no more stalling to do, so I started painting. My first goal or step was to get essentially a rough draft down. I don't like the blank canvas. It feels super overwhelming to look at it and think like, oh my god, I have to cover all of that in paint. So I wanted to knock out as much of it as possible. I know most people do like an underpainting for oils, whether it's just a coat of like oiled down burnt sienna or a fully rendered piece in one color, but I didn't want to do that. Like, that's work. Plus, in one of my few forays into oils before this, I had tried to start with an underpainting and it was so wet that it took I think it took a week to be workable and probably months to be like fully dry. And I don't understand why. Like, I don't know what happened. I don't know, like, is it supposed to be like that? Did I use the wrong thinner? Was it too wet? Like, I don't know. I wasn't sure if it was a fluke or if it would happen again this time, and I just didn't have that time, like, to risk for this commission, so I played it safe. So I started in the way that would make sense for me, the way my brain was computing it. The very first thing was to carve out some of the dark areas as a really easy first step to like ease myself into it. And then I basically did a first layer of slightly thinned down paint, moving somewhat quickly. Like this step, basically, if I had just used thicker paint and went a bit slower and tried a bit harder, like this layer could have been the only layer. Like, there's no difference in method or color choice or anything, but that's not how I work. I like to do one big rough layer to kind of see how certain elements will interact, like the hair over her shoulder. What needs to be painted first? How much of the chainmail underneath needs to be painted? I didn't know until I had done the rough draft. The other main point of the rough draft is it really gets me in the right mindset. It's like an extended warm-up sketch, you know? Like, yeah, I know what I want the final result to be, and I vaguely know how I want to get there, but I'm not sure I can get there on the first try. I can't fully see or like feel the process in my head, but after a few hours or days of painting, that process suddenly becomes like so much clearer and more intuitive, and I feel much more confident about doing it successfully. For example, the scalloped armor and the chainmail, I had ideas of how I wanted to do those, but I really didn't know exactly how to execute those ideas or if they would even work. So for the first draft, it was kind of just slapping color on the canvas where it was meant to be, kind of just mapping out darks and lights. And it wasn't until the second pass that I had figured out I would need to carve out the shadow for the scallops first, then push the light back in because there was so much shadow. And for the chainmail, I thought I would start with this like gradient of blue and gray as the shiny metal, and then individually carve out the dark holes between the links. But I realized that would not work at all, and I'd actually need to work the other way around. I had to put a layer of shadow down and then add in those light details of the links. Which, by the way, I just want to say I'm so obsessed with how the chainmail turned out. Like, I love it. I love it. Some areas really only took one layer, like the cape, which had very little detail, and the background, which again was just a blob of color. Although I did try to work in some shadow to like imply the idea of stones. I had originally intended for it to be like a crumbling stone wall, maybe even some ivy growing on it, but I was having trouble with the perspective of it and making it look believable in the reference photo, and I also thought it would compete with the night way too much, so I decided to go simple. I really thought that the armor was going to take like a lot of work. It had so much detail, so many colors, so many elements. I was really intimidated at first and very nervous, but actually the second pass of most of it was just like easy. Like the bottom half of her torso, the belts and down, really only took one pass, and then I added like the details and shadow. Like I didn't really put that much effort into that area, and it ended up being like one of my favorite parts. The last day was spent adding final details, highlights, and harsh shadows where needed. I was honestly kind of shocked with the ease of the process and how quick it was. I hadn't felt like I had spent a whole lot of time on it, like adding details and neatening it up, so it felt weird to already be adding the final touches. I felt like I had skipped a step, like I had gone straight from the rough draft to adding the last few highlights, you know? But when I stepped back to look at it, like it did look and feel complete. I think the fact that the knight is so large and everything about her is detailed and intricate makes it feel more finished even without so many tiny little details. Like, besides the background, there is no large area of the painting. Like, there's no continuous area of the painting. Every area is broken up. The helmet has lots of segments. Areas of her face are divided, even by the scars. There are so many bits and pieces to her armor. The torso is divided by the sword, not to mention it's covered in scallops instead of being one single sheet of fabric or metal. So even though I didn't spend hours painstakingly adding in things like threads and frayed bits and whatever other details, I still think it comes together to feel detailed and complete. I really didn't come across any major roadblocks during the process, which is crazy. I don't know how that happened. There was no ugly stage somehow. From beginning to end, I was thrilled with how it was looking, and I was so excited to continue. It was just such like smooth sailing. Like, I only dropped a paintbrush once. That's crazy. I never even really got frustrated with this painting. Like, I was feeling, you know, like I wanted to be over with it, like I wanted to be done, but more in the sense that I really wanted to see it finished because I was so excited. And also because knowing that you're going to be spending hours every day painting for a week, it's just kind of exhausting. But I'd say it was worth it. I set the painting aside to dry, planning on painting the edges later. I was tired, but overall feeling really, really good about my week of work. Okay. It took 5 days of painting. 2 days were really long and like 2 days were really short, and one was kind of in between. I'm gonna be honest, I love it. I love it a lot. This is not the first time that I've done an oil, and this is not the first time that I've done a large painting, but this is the first time that I've done something of this magnitude and looked at it at the end and felt fully good about it and felt like it was mine. The previous painting projects that I've done, I've ended by not feeling great about them, not because they don't look good, but because it's not mine. I've had no connection to them. It doesn't feel like my own accomplishment. This is the first time, maybe ever, that I've done something and felt so good about it. Not only am I so proud of how this turned out, I'm so happy with it, but also like it's mine. I didn't just copy a photo. I've been feeling so stuck with my art for the past few months, and I thought that it was because I wasn't making my own original work, and now I'm pretty sure that's the right answer. Like, this is my own original work, and I feel really good about it. Like, I don't feel that like weird missing piece that I always do. I'm so happy with it. Like, I'm not saying it's perfect. Like, there are definitely some weak points to it, definitely places that I need to improve. But I don't even care. Like, I'm so happy. I really don't even have anything to say. Like, I'm just so happy. It was a lot of hard work. And nearing the end there, I really wanted to be done with it, mainly because I was nearing a deadline. And so the mental weight of it was getting like worse and worse. But overall, I had a really good time doing it. Like, this really wasn't a piece that I had to like kill myself to do or had to like really motivate myself for. Like, I just did want to do it and I did have a good time. I just want to look at it. It's gonna be really hard to part with it, but I'm gonna try to scan it or get photos before I send it out so I can possibly make it a print, either for myself or if anyone else wants it. I'm just very pleased. I don't even like have anything else to say. Like, I'm just happy with it. I like it. I feel confident saying like this is my best work so far. It's big, it's original, I feel on for me, it's a lady night. Yeah, that's it. I'm just gonna keep repeating myself by saying how happy I am, so I'm just gonna wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you had a good time. I had an amazing time. I really want to continue to do projects like this. If you did like it and you want to see me do more of this stuff, comment, like, subscribe, the whole shebang. Let me know if this is like the kind of content you like to see. Because if I know you guys are waiting on it, it will make me want to do it more. I'm gonna sit and stare at this for a while, so go make a quesadilla, fold your laundry, and go do some art. Oh, I love it so much. Okay, bye.